All right, let's dive right in. So, you think you know the Mahabharata? Well, get ready, because we're about to look at it in a completely new light. We're going to explore how this epic tale isn't just about a mythic war. It's about the very real, very spectacular collapse of ancient India's first great state.
It all starts with this one simple, powerful idea. I want you to just forget about the massive armies and the divine weapons for a second. The real story, the one that truly matters, starts long before a single arrow was ever fired.
Exactly. If it's not war, then what is it? It begins with a state, a kingdom that on the surface was powerful, prosperous, but underneath it was fundamentally broken. The real story here is about political failure.
Okay, so we're going to peel back the layers here, go way beyond the battlefield. This isn't a story of glorious conquest. No. It's about what happens when a powerful state just completely shatters from the inside out. And this is a total game changer for how you see this story. The central character, it isn't Arjuna. It's not Duryodhana. It's the Kuru state. Its birth, its incredible success, and its catastrophic self-inflicted collapse. That is the true story arc of the Mahabharata. Now, to understand how this state could fail so spectacularly, we first have to get our heads around what made it so revolutionary in the first place. See, the Kurus didn't just build another kingdom. They literally invented a brand new way of organizing power in ancient India. Okay, so check this out. On the left, you've got the old way of doing this. Power was all about people, the jana. You had these mobile tribes and your loyalty was to your bloodline. But the Kurus, over on the right, they completely changed the game. They tied power to the land. All of a sudden, you have fixed territories and permanent capitals. Loyalty wasn't just a family, it was to a place. And that shift made controlling that specific piece of land the ultimate prize, which turned every single family argument over succession into a potential state-destroying crisis. And look, this didn't just happen by accident. No way. This was a deliberate political project. Around 1200 BCE, you see these two big lineages, the Bharata and the Puru. They merge. They centralize religious authority, they make the king more important than the old tribal councils, and, this is the big one, they fix their power to territory instead of just following the herds. That's how you build India's first true territorial state. Okay, so what did this new state actually look like, on the ground? It wasn't just some abstract idea. It had a real, physical heart, a political nerve center, and a sacred landscape that basically defined who the Kurush were. Right at the heart of everything was Hastinapura. You got to think of it as the kingdom's economic and political engine, plopped down in this super fertile river floodplain. It was the hub for the elite, for their power, for their wealth. But here's the catch. It was a capital before bureaucracy. Think about that for a second. It had all the power, but none of the stable, boring, but essential administration to manage it. That's a huge deal. And then you have Kurukshetra. We all know it as the place where the big battle happened, right? But its importance goes way back before the war. It was the kingdom's sacred ritual heartland. This was the stage where Kuru legitimacy was performed and proven. So fighting the final battle there, that wasn't just for dramatic effect. It was politically inevitable. If you wanted to control the Kuru state, you had to win at its symbolic center.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting. For all its power, for all its innovation, the Kuru state was built with a catastrophic design flaw. It's like it had this immense, powerful engine, but no steering wheel and definitely no brakes. Its collapse wasn't just possible, it was basically designed to fail. This table right here just lays it all out so perfectly. Look at the strengths on the left. Hereditary kings, religious legitimacy, control over all this rich land. That's some serious power. But then you look at the weaknesses on the right, and it's a disaster waiting to happen. No clear rules for who's next in line, no real administration to keep things running, and a system where who you know, your personal loyalty, was always more important than any actual rule of law. That imbalance, it was absolutely fatal.
Okay, if you remember one thing from this whole explainer, let it be this. Power wasn't invested in the office of the king, it was invested in the person of the king. It wasn't about the job title, it was about the guy in the job. And when you don't have those impersonal institutions, every single time power has to change hands, the whole system depends entirely on the personal relationships of a handful of powerful people. When those relationships crumble, the state crumbles right along with them. So you might be thinking, okay, this is a cool theory, but is it just a clever reading of an old story? Well, this is where we get to bring in the hard evidence, because the archaeology, Wow, it paints a picture that lines up almost perfectly with the world the epic is describing. So, archaeologists have this thing they call painted gray ware, or PGW. It's basically a specific type of pottery. And what's amazing is that this pottery culture shows up in exactly the right places and at exactly the right time to be the Kuru Kingdom. At these sites, they find iron tools for farming, they find artifacts that point to a ruling elite, but the towns themselves are pretty modest, not these giant stone cities you might imagine. I mean, just look at this. It's practically a perfect match. The epic talks about powerful kings, archaeology finds this elite material culture. The epic describes modest capitals like Hastinapura, archaeology finds non-urban settlements. The economy of the epic is all about farming. Archaeology finds iron tools to do that farming. The world of the Mahabharata isn't some fantasy land, it is absolutely rooted in a real historical period. So what you end up with is this, like a perfect storm. The 4 key ingredients for a total collapse. First, you need a state that's powerful and rich enough to actually be worth fighting over. Check. Second, you need multiple heirs who all have a legit claim. Check. Third, a sacred center like Kurukshetra to give the fight a higher meaning. Check. And finally, you need a network of outside allies to pour gasoline on the fire. The Kurus had all 4. And here's the kicker. Only the Kuru Kingdom at that specific moment in time had all 4 of these explosive ingredients. The tribal societies that came before them were too fluid, too mobile for this kind of war. And the big empires that came later, like the Mauryas, they had developed the boring but life-saving bureaucracies to manage this stuff. The Kuru state was caught in this uniquely fragile and incredibly dangerous middle ground. And that, right there, is the ultimate takeaway. The epic isn't just a memory of some chaotic mythical war. It's a really sophisticated and powerful cultural memory of a very real political problem: institutional insufficiency. It's the story of a state whose power just grew way faster than its wisdom. And that's what brings this ancient story crashing right into our world today. The Kuruksite state collapsed because its power outgrew its ability to manage that power. It's a timeless warning about what happens when you have runaway growth without the right safeguards. So, I want to leave you with this question to chew on. What modern institutions, companies, or even technologies are growing so fast right now that they risk the exact same kind of collapse? It's something worth thinking about. Thanks for tuning in.